Hey guys, I'm Salvation again, and this is the second part of my video about double dipping. This time we will look at the sources of double dipping, and there are three distinct categories we will look at. The first one is the skill tree. Let's talk about the most broadly applicable modifiers first, and that is area damage and projectile damage. Every skill tagged with AoE or projectile can use these modifiers to double dip on the dot. And just to recap a little bit on the first part of the video, this means if you, for example, shoot puncture with a bow, you will cause an initial hit and a damage over time effect based on that initial hit. If you then take a node in the tree that says projectile damage, this projectile damage modifier will modify the initial hit and also the damage over time effect caused by it. If you take a node that says, for example, increased damage with bows or attacks with bows, this will only increase the initial hit and not apply to the damage over time effect. This category of modifier, area damage and projectile damage, can be used by a lot of skills and works for all the damage over time effects in the game, as in poison, bleed and burn. Next up we have a set of modifiers that also can apply to all the dot types in the game, but is a bit more specific. That is trap damage, mine damage and totem damage. These nodes will double dip on the dot, but yeah, as you see, you need to use a trap, mine or totem. And with totems we also have the problem that the spell totem support and the ranged attack totem support have less multipliers, so it's a bit hard to double dip that. You can basically only use the things like shockwave totems that don't need a totem support, so totem double dipping is kinda limited. Trap and mine double dipping was also rage in 2.3 because you could double dip a lot and get really high damage numbers, and the poison bladefall miners that were farming Überserie were abusing this fact really hard, and it was a bit nerfed, but we will see that in the next category that I will talk about, because they were nerfed in the support gem department. But before we talk about that, we have a last category of types of modifiers on the skill tree, and that is specific damage types like chaos damage, elemental damage, fire damage or physical damage. Those will double dip on the dots if of course the initial hit is the same damage type as the dot. So if you are poisoning with physical damage, chaos damage nodes won't double dip at all, but if you are causing bleed with physical damage, then a general physical damage node like Force Shaper will double dip on that. The same goes for poison damage. If you are poisoning with mainly chaos damage, then the chaos damage nodes will be good nodes to look for to get some double dipping going. Next up are the support gems. Those follow mainly the same rules, so we don't need to talk all that long about them. It's again area damage and projectile damage, like in concentrated effect or slower projectiles. Then you have the specific damage types like chaos damage on void manipulation, and then trap and mine damage. And you should note that the trap and mine support itself got nerfed in the recent patch, and those do only apply to hits now. So the trap and mine damage support does still work, and the nodes on the skill tree do still work for trap and mine double dipping, but the base gem trap support and remote mine support got their modifiers changed. They're still usable because they don't have a less multiplier like for example, a spell totem has, but they are not anymore 40% more multiplier that double dips. The next category is the active skill gems, or I could better say curses, because it's mainly curses like vulnerability and flammability. Vulnerability, of course, always increases dot damage, but it also increases the physical damage, and because of that it can basically triple dip on bleeds, because it will increase the base hit, then will increase the damage over time and the physical damage caused by the damage over time. So it's a really good multiplier for bleeding, and it will also increase the all damage over time, but that is not double dipping. But if you're doing physical damage over time, then a vulnerability will double dip. Same goes for flammability. If you're causing burns, the flammability will increase the base hit and then again the burn damage, because it lowers the resist to fire damage, and that is like taking increased fire damage or more fire damage in the tree. The last one I have is Wither, and that isn't a curse. That's why I say active skill gems and not curses. Wither is mainly used if you're poisoning with chaos damage. That is, for example, the case if you're using Essence Drain with poison to increase your single target damage. Then of course there are items that might increase your damage in one of those categories, and those work the same basically as the skill tree. So if you have a drill neck that increases your projectile damage, that is exactly the same thing as taking projectile damage in the tree. There are lots of unique items, so I don't try to name them all. It's just the same categories of multipliers that do apply. So that's about the sources of double dipping. Of course I did not name every single source. There are lots of nodes on the tree and lots of other skill gems that may double dip, but yeah, it was talking about in categories like the projectile damage and AoE damage, and if a gem says that it increases the projectile damage, then it will double dip. So that's why I did not cover each single one. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe, it helps me a lot.